What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Iron Obsession podcast. I've got a solo Q&A for you guys. As always, I took questions on my Instagram at AnsonRobbins_bodybuilding, which you will see below me here on the screen. And I also took some questions from the community Discord server, which has been popping off lately. If you guys are not a part of that, please check it out. There should be a link to that either in the description here, a pinned comment, or on my Instagram in my link tree. So let's get right into it. Are myostatin inhibitors the future? Yes and no. Are they the future? Inevitably so, I would imagine. I would imagine eventually the technology progresses to a point to where it can be accessible for people. I mean, if we just look at the history of the sport as it is right now, it's 2026. Back in 1996, I don't think things like growth hormone, anabolics, insulin in general were very accessible to the average person. And nowadays, I mean, a lot of people at the gym who don't even look like they work out are on all of these things. It's very accessible. And the thing that is a bit different with myostatin inhibitors is there's not really any real ones that are out right now that I'm aware of. We see certain forms of follistatin that are beginning to come on the market, but there's just not enough person-to-person case usage, or definitely not studies. And there's just not really many examples of people actually using them and them impacting a physique. I have used follistatin, supposedly from a peptide site, and it was unremarkable. It did nothing, essentially. Same kind of thing like with IGF, except with IGF, like actual IGF, even if it's LR3 from a pharmacy, it does something. You'll get a good pump from it. Is it going to make that big of a difference? No. But then you have the more advanced version of that called Increlex, and that absolutely does work. We've got quite a few examples of guys using that and it taking their physique to, I don't want to say the next level, but it giving them a nice boost. It's kind of like the sprinkle on top, and I have no personal experience with that. I have used a good bit of IGF LR3 and DES in my day. It's a nice pre-workout pump product, I'll say that. Other than that, it doesn't do much. It's very expensive. At least back when I was using it, it was very expensive. And overall, long story short, just use more growth. That'll do way more for you. But I could see them coming out with a myostatin inhibitor, because even anabolics, to a degree, lower myostatin. Hell, MOTS-C, which we just talked about on the show, that technically inhibits myostatin a little bit. Really anything that builds muscle is going to kind of limit myostatin, or the production of it, to a degree. The question is, are they going to make something that is essentially the primary function of it, that is the primary pathway that causes growth? I would assume so. But at the same time, I also wonder, is it going to be myostatin inhibitors that are kind of that first thing to level up bodybuilding technology, I suppose you could call it? Or is it going to be like gene editing or something? Realistically, there's no way to know. As of right now, I would say they look to be something to keep an eye on in the future, but I wouldn't get a sense of FOMO, right? Like if you see somebody trialing, like for example, my coach is trialing out a certain form of follistatin. I don't know a lot about it, so I'm not going to speak too much to it. But I wouldn't get FOMO for that. I wouldn't be like, oh man, people are starting to try this, now I got to try it. I wouldn't feel that way about it at all. We have so much available to us in terms of training knowledge, diet knowledge, over-the-counter supplements, bodybuilding pharmacology, all these different things. Like Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, just countless freaks have been made without it. So you don't need it. I wouldn't worry about it. All right, next question. How common will GLPs be within the next 5 years at this rate? That's a good question. How common will they be in the gray market? Well, they're already gone. You can't get them without a prescription or through the black market. Those are the two ways you're going to be able to get them now, is the black market and prescription. And they'll always be available on the black market, in my opinion. They're too effective at what they do. I don't want to say they're miracle drugs, but and I'm personally specifically talking about retatrutide, GLP-3, the third generation. I really, if you agree with it and it agrees with you, I don't see a reason not to use it, at the very least at a small dose. And I've heard some people that I respect kind of poo-poo on retatrutide in general lately, and I don't think they have ill intentions, but I think they are ill-informed. Retatrutide, I've already seen it within myself and with other people I know. It has been life-changing. Not, and here's the caveat to that. Not because it's limiting your appetite, but because of the health effects. The changes in blood thickness markers, which I refer to blood thickness markers, that basically encompasses things like hematocrit, hemoglobin, red blood cell count. I saw mine go dramatically down. I saw my cholesterol dramatically improve. I saw my A1C dramatically improve. I even saw, like, my kidney numbers are usually pretty good, but they were exceptional the last time I got blood work. There's really not any area of my blood work that it did not improve. So for that reason alone, I think everybody who is in the space of enhanced bodybuilding should at least try it. Now, if you get any of the side effects, like the GI issues particularly, not for you. But there are other things that you can use for that, like a MOTS-C, which I don't know if MOTS-C would have the same health benefits, but I know it would have the same insulin sensitivity benefits at the least. It's so good at a myriad of different things. I look at it as kind of like a prophylactic going forward, just to blanket most people's programs. Again, so long as they don't get issues. And we're not talking about 7 milligrams a day or 11 milligrams a day or some absurd doses you hear for it. The health changes that I got were at anywhere from 0.5 milligram to 1 milligram a week. Not a day, a week. And sure, my diet is better than it's ever been. A lot of things are really clicking for me right now, but I can tell you, there have been other periods throughout my life where I've had similar things happening and I didn't get this. To me, the anti-food focus and the appetite reduction are the last things I care about when it comes to retatrutide. Its appetite reduction is minimal. I'm eating 7,000 calories a day right now. You think if it was suppressing my appetite that much that I could eat? Like, no, it's not doing that. Now, sure, if you crank it up to 10 milligrams or 1 milligram a day, something like that, yeah, it'll probably do that. But that's stupidity. That is where I agree with the people who are against it. There's no reason for that. Like, you're going to be hungry in a contest prep. Suck it the fuck up and deal with it. It's a part of the sport. Now, I do think there's something to be said about, if you can make a contest prep go smoother, go for it. But you still shouldn't run away from the typical issues of a contest prep, like hunger. But to me, hunger is the least challenging part of a contest prep. Like, that is at the bottom of the totem pole. Like, there are so many things that are worse. The energy, the sleep, the way you feel in the gym at 2-3 weeks out, before your food bumps up. There's so many worse parts of it. So that is why I believe that GLPs, particularly retatrutide, will be around pretty much forever. Now, the first generation, which I believe is Ozempic, garbage fucking compound, garbage drug. Nobody should be using that. Period. Full stop. Terrible compound. You want to talk about getting those GI side effects? That's Ozempic. That's where people actually get the stomach paralysis. Very rare. I don't even know if I've ever heard of somebody getting that from retatrutide. It's normally in combination with multiple different types of GLPs, and especially when using the first generation Ozempic. Tirzepatide. And also, here's another thing about Ozempic. As far as I understand it, it is literally just appetite reduction. And the mechanism of action through which it reduces appetite is essentially the gastric emptying delaying. It's just making food stick in your stomach forever. That's not valuable to us at all. I don't even think that's valuable for like Gen Pop people or diabetics. I don't think that's valuable. There are much, much, much better ways to reduce appetite than something that could potentially cause you to have to go to the hospital. But regardless, the second generation tirzepatide does have a little bit of the glucose control aspects of retatrutide, but not quite as much. So tirzepatide would only really be something I would recommend for someone if they can't tolerate retatrutide. But in all likelihood, if you can't tolerate retatrutide, you probably can't tolerate tirzepatide either. So my next thought on the topic would be, okay, so we have this first, second, and third generation GLP. What is the fourth going to look like? Is the fourth going to make retatrutide be obsolete? That's something to look out for. I'm very curious to see that. Now, I'm not typically the type of person who really wants to experiment with very new things. I like to, not be the last person to adopt something, but not the first either. With a GLP-4 that would be coming out, I would want to at least see some animal models or have at least one person that I respect try it and give their feedback. But that is definitely something I would be interested in. And as far as the pharmaceutical development goes, the money's there for them to continue to. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a drug get through phases of trials as quickly as retatrutide has. It's the only other one is the one that I'm not going to say that happened back around in 2021 or 2022 that got warped. You know what I mean? Not going to mention that though, because I don't want to get shadow banned. That's the only other time that I can think of a drug getting through trials quicker. Retatrutide has been blazing through all these things. So the money's definitely there for R&D. I'm curious to see what they do with it in the future. So will they be around in 5 years? Yeah, absolutely. I think they'll be around in 50. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I definitely think they'll be around in 5 years. I know at the very least in the bodybuilding world, they're not going anywhere, especially retatrutide. All right. Favorite stack design you've ran so far? I mean, definitely the one I'm doing right now, which is essentially, I mean, I'll just give dosages. I don't care. You guys know what I do. But, so a gram of test, 600 EQ, 350 MPP. So kind of like test at, so what is that? That's almost 2 grams, right? So test is a little over half of the total milligram load. A little over half of the milligram load in 600 is a compound that controls estrogen. So in this case, equipoise. And then the remainder of that is coming from another aromatizing compound like a 19-nor in this case, nandrolone. I like that because before we added, and so we started off with the testing the EQ for the first 10 weeks, 12 weeks, something like that. I could be mistaken. It may have been a bit shorter than that. It could have been as early as 8 weeks. I'd have to go back and look. I want to say, we'll just say 10 weeks, right? And I almost felt like my estrogen was a bit too low during that time. I didn't feel bad, but I didn't feel as good as I feel right now. With MPP being in, I feel fantastic. My joints feel great. My mood is actually better. And a lot of people talk about 19-nors making them feel bad or maybe like almost depressed. Opposite for me. And I think that's because the cycle design is intelligent. Joe knows his shit, point blank. It's just enough aromatization and just enough control. I am also taking 2 milligrams of Arimidex, but that is shoehorned in from my cruise, because before we went on my cruise, my E2 was like 200. So we threw in 2 mgs of Arimidex and we've just kind of left it in ever since. And I feel like that's a good amount too. Estrogen feels in a pretty good spot. Now, before the MPP was added in, I probably shouldn't have been on the Arimidex. I probably should have mentioned that. But we added in the MPP, and EQ takes so long to build up. I only really felt not amazing for like a week, maybe 2 max. And I'm just not a complainer. Generally, like, something has to be pretty bad for me to say anything about it, honestly. So with all of those ratios, you then, of course, also have growth, and then very sporadic insulin use on leg and back days. So, for example, this week, like I've talked about quite a bit, I have a rotating split. 1 week is 5 days in the gym. The next week is 4 days in the gym. Then we go back to 5, back to 4, back to 5, back to 4. On a 5-day split, I will have 3 days of Lantus use because I will have 2 leg days and a pull day. On a 4-day split, I will have just 2 uses because it'll be pull day and it'll be leg day. With me, and I do use Humalog on all training days, but it's only 5 units pre-workout. That's nothing, in my opinion. I could probably, which I mean, I definitely can tell the pump and the fullness from that, but I could realistically probably remove that and things wouldn't be that different. With the use being this sporadic, I feel like I get all of the benefits and none of the downsides. And with growth being high, I just feel like recovery is always good. This is probably about my max dose growth I can tolerate. I'm getting a little bit of carpal tunnel, nothing crazy. Just like if I have my hands held up like on the treadmill while I'm doing my steps, or not really at night. Maybe like if I stay on one side the entire night, I might notice a little bit of hand numbness, but nothing too bad. I think if we took it much higher, I'd probably have to add in something like a HCTZ to control that carpal tunnel, or maybe just throw in a bunch of ALA. That seems to be something that's working lately for people. So this overall just feels like the least amount of side effects I've ever dealt with on the most amount of compounds I've ever taken, consistently, at least. I mean, I've always been a believer in high test. I don't think I have ever in my life, once I like actually started taking bodybuilding seriously, I don't think I've ever like ran my test as the lowest compound or something like that. And that's because I have always had the understanding of how important bioidentical hormones are. Just coming from that background of starting TRT at a young age, I always knew test was the foundation. So overall, how I would describe the design of this, which is my favorite, is high test, something to control estrogen at probably about 50% of the dose of that test, and then if you can handle it, something that aromatizes, and if not, probably something drier. Like if I couldn't tolerate the MPP, I would probably opt for like a Masteron. Is there anything else that I would opt for? No, I'm not a big fan of DHB, so I've never used it actually. You won't hear me opting for that, and I don't think it would be super smart to run Trenbolone in this cycle either. So, it's just, there's just nothing that I can point to about it that's bad. That's why I like it. Like all of it just makes sense to me. And that's really one of the big reasons I hired Joe, was because I knew that we aligned on how we thought about this type of stuff. I remember watching his content when I was in contest prep and shortly after on the rebound, I was like, okay, this guy likes low fat diets. He likes really pushing food, and he believes test is best. And, when health is good, he's not afraid to push things in an intelligent and thoughtful way. So yeah, this is exactly how I would design my own cycle. I did not design this. Joe 100% designed it. But if this were me helping a client, this is not necessarily the doses unless they needed it. This is exactly what I'd write for them. All right. All right, so this is a rate my cycle question. Okay, so I'm assuming that means testosterone. Okay, so this person is 250 pounds, about 18% body fat. I'm not sure what height, but I would guess pretty tall. Cutting on 200 milligrams. It just says 200 milligrams. I'm assuming that means testosterone. So basically TRT. 3.5 milligrams Retta. So I guess this is a rated diet too. 325 protein, 290 carbs, 60 fats. Okay. So the first thing I would say, the Retta is a little high, but you are dieting, so that is a time where I guess this person does want the appetite suppression. I'm almost of the opinion where I would maybe rather just see them on a lower dose of Retta, like 2 milligrams a week, and then add in a little bit of tirzepatide. But I'm personally not a huge fan of using GLP strictly for appetite reduction, like I was mentioning earlier. But if it's me rating it, like what would I do? That's what I would do. I would probably cut the Retta down and either add in some type of other fat burner. I would want to see, so we have hormone replacement here in 200 milligrams of testosterone. Depending on blood work, I would want to see maybe some T4 in there, because typically we're going to need that in a deficit. And if I'm not mistaken, I do know who asked this question. I believe that he is dieting down and has been cutting weight for a long time, has made a ton of progress. So I would definitely want to see him get his blood markers checked, make sure thyroid health is good. Especially when you've been dieting for a long time, T3 and T4 levels are something that we can be concerned about. I'm of the opinion, I just think most people who are going to be on, well, he's not on growth hormone, to be fair. Yeah, I would still be curious to see what T4 levels are and get that checked out. Maybe do like 50 to 100 micrograms of T4, and if needed, I would do that. Check blood work again, and then see how T3 levels were, and then if needed, maybe like 12.5 T3. That can help a lot of people. And then as far as the diet goes, 325 protein, 290 carbs, 60 fats. Being 250, I honestly wouldn't mind seeing the protein a little higher, but you guys know me, I'm a big believer in high protein. My protein right now is like north of 500. I want to say like 510 or something. Could definitely bump up the protein a little bit. And honestly, the nice thing about protein is it's so satiating. You'll probably have an easier time dieting that way. I would reduce the fat a little bit. We don't need the fat because TRT is there. There's really no reason for it other than the fact that it tastes good. So I'd probably bump the protein up to maybe 400 if he can tolerate it digestion wise. That is super important. If he's tried high protein in the past and has digestive issues, then obviously we're not going to change it. But if this were a client coming to me and this was all the information I was presented with, I would definitely bump the protein up to at least 350, maybe as high as 375, 400, so long as they didn't have any issues. I'd probably leave the carbs where they are, maybe bump them up to 300. They're at 290, so just a tad more, and then bump the fats down to pretty much maybe added fats in one meal, so probably about 50 or 45. But again, that's just my preference. Overall, I don't see anything in this that is bad or it sticks out at me, other than the Retta being a little high, but 3.5 ain't that bad. Like, I've heard people taking 7, 8, 9, like we were talking about earlier. I would be curious to see blood work, because I do believe that this is someone who's been dieting for a while. I'd be curious to see where your estrogen is at, where your T4 is at. Probably has a really, really good fasted insulin, fasted glucose, and A1C because of the 3.5 Retta. And as far as adding, honestly, I think a little, because you are doing Retta, you do have a little bit of space to play with within the insulin sensitivity. So maybe try a little growth. I don't know. And he may be doing that. The question box is only so big. But yeah, I mean, if I had to put a number to rate it, it'd be like, this is fine. It's not like an actual cycle. It's just kind of like HRT plus. So, for what it is, for like an HRT plus, it's 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, nothing wrong with it. If we're looking to like really aggressively diet though, 5 out of 5, or 5 out of 10 rather, it's just average. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing to really, say super positive about either. It's just, if it's working for you, man, don't change it. At the end of the day, everything I just said, if it's working for you, completely ignore my ass and just keep cranking. Absolutely nothing wrong with it if this is working for you. And it does actually set you up in a really good spot afterwards. One nice thing about him doing HRT for a diet phase is, let's say you get from 18% body fat down to 8% body fat on this. Well, you've got a lot of room to play with in terms of hormones. You know, you could bump that test from 200 to 600 and make a ton of progress in that reverse. And then you could maybe bump the Retta back down to like 1 milligram a week or so, 2 milligrams at most, maybe. Yeah, and do really well off of that. So I'm going to assume that's what he's doing. He's just setting himself up for a really potent rebound in the future. All right. I think this question is kind of a joke, but I'm still going to kind of do it anyways. This is my friend at the gym. He says to rate the diet and physique of a powerlifter, but he didn't give me his diet. So I think he's just going to ask, like, what do you think about the average powerlifter's diet and physique? I will say it's a lot better than it used to be. Back when I first started working out in 2015, 2016, most powerlifters looked like a warmed over bag of milk, and it was bad. The ones I knew, the famous ones, yeah, it was bad. Nowadays, you see a lot of guys like John Hack. There's another guy that looks great. I can't think of the name of, but then you have some older school examples like Dan Green, if I'm not mistaken. That guy always looked awesome. There's a lot of powerlifters that cross over into bodybuilding nowadays too. I think his name is Ben Polek, PH Deadlift. He got his pro card a few years back. And just a lot of countless amateurs that are, actually some of them are pro powerlifters that then go into amateur bodybuilding and very shortly after turn pro. Powerlifting is great. I think if you could probably, if you're someone who's interested in powerlifting, you could probably spend your teens years, maybe your early 20s in powerlifting. Don't get sloppy fat, kind of keep a respectable body comp on you, compete within a decent weight class, really build an awesome foundation of strength, and you could transition that into a really good starting point for bodybuilding. Now, I'm also of the opinion that the sooner you get started in bodybuilding, especially the enhanced side, the better. But if, let's say you want to, because bodybuilding is 24/7, 365. Powerlifting is 2-3 hours in the gym, and maybe you meal prep a little bit on the side, and then you're a weekend warrior. A lot of successful powerlifters do that. Hell, some of the most successful powerlifters of all time do that. If you're someone who you just want to live like a normal person during your college years, be a powerlifter, because you can still be in the gym, have a blast, but you don't have to live like a monk like most of us do who want to be involved in bodybuilding. And then when you're a bit more mature, a bit wiser in, how you're going to handle your diet and maybe your other extracurriculars like alcohol, then you can kind of transition more into bodybuilding. I think that's a great template for a lot of people. But how would I rate the diet of the average powerlifter? Even the powerlifters who keep pretty good body comp, they still kind of eat like dickheads some of the time. It's crazy, the things I'll see in my gym, man. Even like some of these guys who look good will be eating a honey bun in the middle of their workout. It's crazy. But all the love to them. Y'all are fucking animals. I guess, hey, you know what? If I could squat 600 pounds for a single, and I'd probably want to eat a honey bun after too, right? So yeah, as far as the physique goes, I think there are a lot of powerlifters with great physiques nowadays. They're not bodybuilders by any means. I mean, you would never mistake them for bodybuilders, but you would also never mistake that they, you wouldn't think they don't work out. And back in the day, there were a lot of really soft powerlifters who you would look at them with a t-shirt on and not even think they work out. That's not really the case anymore nowadays. And a lot of them are getting better on their diets. I would say they're at least 80-20. They've got an 80% foundation of decently clean food. Not like bodybuilding style where we take the low fat approach and high carb, high protein. They'll be more like moderate to high fat, moderate to high carb, low for what I would consider protein, but realistically moderate protein. All right. The last question, unfortunately, I don't have a ton of input for because I've never done it, but copper peptide experiences and thoughts. I've never used it. I've never had a reason to use it. The main reason I've heard of people using it, hair loss. Yeah, I just never have really looked into it for that particularly. I have heard about some blends where people will combine BPC 157, TB 500, and GHKU copper, I think is the name of it. So I do believe there is some recovery benefits. And actually, believe it or not, I do believe there is shown to be some site enhancement benefits for putting it in an area. I'm not 100% sure about that. Kind of talking out of my ass there. But I remember Vigorous Steve made a video a while back on like because this is back when I was like really obsessed on getting my legs bigger, but I didn't realize my training was shit, so I could just fix that and it would fix the problem. But he made a list of like all the things that would particularly enhance the site directly, and I believe GHK copper was on that list. I did actually hear my coach Joe Percher, talk recently on a podcast about how there have been some findings on GHK copper that it actually is probably not good for bodybuilding because there are certain like I don't know if I want to say catabolic processes, but it just incites certain processes within the muscle cell that are not super beneficial for bodybuilding. I would have to look into that more, which, you know, I hear that, and then I also hear the site enhancement things, but yeah, that site enhancement information is super old information, and then it potentially not being great for bodybuilders is very new information. So with research compounds, a lot of the times things will come out that just completely 180 what we know and what we think we know about a compound. Overall, the copper peptide is not something I would use. I will say I've heard is it extremely painful. I have heard it is not a fun time in that regard. It's not something I would personally use. It's not something I would personally recommend. Just to kind of go through a short list of the peptides that I would recommend. Let's see. We got your standard TB, BPC for injuries, MOTS-C for insulin sensitivity, and also retatrutide. AOD, anti-obesity drug, 964, whatever, it's got a number behind it. That seems to have pretty positive user experience. 5-amino-1-MQ also seems to have very, very good reviews by people. SLU, not technically a peptide, small molecule, but same difference. SLU seems to be very beneficial, very little side effects. Oral BPC as well, very good for the gut. I'm sure I'm forgetting something here. Those are the main ones that kind of come straight off my mind. Yeah, I don't really think, and you know, obviously growth and insulin, but when we're talking about peptides, we're assuming that growth and insulin are kind of in this old school category. There's something entirely different. So yeah, that is all the questions I have today. Double checking that I cover all those. Yes. All right. So that is all the questions I have for you guys today. Thank you all for people who left questions. We got quite a few of them this time around. I really appreciate that. I love seeing people get involved in the community. And, you know, actually, speaking of the community, we do have a Discord server. Just wanted to double check, see if we have any last minute questions. Nope, but we did just have some people join the Discord server, so glad to see you guys there. Yeah, so this has been another episode of the Iron Obsession Podcast Q&A. Thank you guys for watching. All the links will be in the description below, and yeah, see you guys next time.